Hello, welcome everyone. Hello. Welcome everyone. Anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Jessica Martin, the MD of Jersey Road. It's lovely to see you all here this evening. We exist to help Christian organisations communicate with impact, and it is lovely to see lots of familiar faces. Some of you we've worked with since we started in 2010, but it's lovely to see some new faces as well, and to be able to, for our team to be able to get to know you and talk to you about the excellent work that you do. It's very intentional for us that we work just with Christian organisations. So we recognise the impact of the work that you do in various areas, whether it's communicating the gospel and social care or development, mission work, the impact that it has on people's lives. So that's why we choose just to work with Christian organisations. And as communicators, whilst a lot of you are not always on the front line of the work that your organisations are doing, everyone in this room recognises the value of that. The purpose of this evening, we're hoping, is going to help equip you all to understand a bit more that the impact that audience insights can make on the work that you're doing, and to help you work even more effectively and to steward the resources and the money and the time that is going into the work that you're doing. So we're going to start this evening with, sorry, I'm standing right in front of you. There we go. It's beautiful faces there of our panel. We're going to start with a panel session for about 45 minutes and then move into a Q&A, and then there'll be time for more chatting. I hate the word networking, it's really yucky. Chatting and eating and drinking, and then we'll finish up at about 7:30. The toilets are, gents is that way, and then I think anyone can go in those toilets, so there's 2 toilets there as well. And if the fire alarm goes off, there is definitely some smouldering happening somewhere and some smoke. There will not be any pretend fire alarms going off. So if there is a fire alarm, please go out of the front and stand in front of Pret, and maybe someone will have a yellow vest on, possibly. I think that's all of the housekeeping things I have to share with you. I'm going to hand over to Liam and let him kick things off.
Thank you, Jessica. I think we're going to share a mic here between us, so Andrew, why don't you grab that? Okay, thank you, Jessica. Welcome again. Just want to echo what Jessica has said. So good that you've been able to be with us this evening. Thank you for your time. Thank you for travelling across London. Thank you for those of you who've come even further. And our title for this evening is How to Future-Proof Your Non-Profit. So we're aware that there'll be a real range in this room. Some of you will have not grappled with insights before, and this will be a bit of a fact-finding exercise for you. Some of you may be experts already in insights. Great. You're very welcome, but we're very confident that with the panel we have here this evening, there'll be something for you that you can take away, real value for you. So we appreciate you being here. For those who don't know me, I haven't had a chance to meet all of you yet. My name is Liam Flint, so I'm the Marketing and Comms Officer here at Jersey Road. And delighted to say this is the main event. This is why we're here. We have a great panel with us this evening. I'll leave Gareth last. So really, really pleased to welcome Andrew Hawkins with us. Andrew is founder of Comres and also Whitestone Insight. Andrew, great to have you with us, so thank you for your time. Next to him we have Libby Hart, who is a Senior Director for Donor Engagement for Prison Fellowship International. She's come over from Germany to be with us, so again, thank you so much, Libby, for your time. And last but not least, we have the CEO of Jersey Road, Gareth Russell. Gareth, thanks for turning up.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
All the wisdom's going to be coming from this end. But we're really excited for what we're going to be talking about this evening. We are going to break it down into some very manageable chunks for you. So hopefully it'll be very easy to follow. Let me just tell you where we're going to be heading. So we're going to start with why bother with insights. Some of you may actually think, why would I give my time to this to start with? Then we're going to move on to getting started with insights and get practical. Then we're going to talk about the impact of insights, a bit of a case study look at, and then we're going to finish with how you can implement those insights. But for starters, I think we just need to get a bit of a read on what we mean by insights. So let's do that. But Andrew, for starters, could you tell us a little bit about what Whitestone Insight is all about, Comres, what you've been involved in?
Sure, thank you very much. Well, insight, I mean, the way I see it is that it's all about finding out what other people think about you, your competitors for the pounds in people's pockets or the attention of audiences. I've been doing that for sort of 3 decades-ish. Set Comres up in after working in the polling industry, set it up in 2003. It was either that or go to Vicar Factory, actually, and I would have made the absolute worst vicar imaginable. So it was the right thing to do. And we had a great run at Comres. It was acquired in the end by Savanta in 2019. If you told me 3 years later I'd set another polling business up, I would have handed you the loaded revolver myself. But God has a strange way of changing our desires, and there were a number of clients who were having trouble getting the insight that they needed, and I actually found that on some issues I just couldn't stay away. I mean, the issue of the day-to-day of the moment, assisted suicide, I started getting involved in that in the mid-2000s, and it was because the polling was being, from the other side, was being misused appallingly. And I remember seeing a poll that suggested the claim that 80% of Christians supported what was then the Joffe bill, that some of you may remember. It was an early attempt to legalise assisted suicide. And the more I looked at it, the more I realised it was nonsense. So we had a good run of that. So when it comes to charities, especially Christian charities, we're in a church, so I'm going to beg your indulgence for a moment to read a verse from Ecclesiastes, which may help explain why some people are a bit diffident about finding out what other people think of them. It's Ecclesiastes 7, verse 21. Do not take to heart all the things that people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. Now, at the risk of a woeful exegesis of that, I think there is a truth to that, in that you may not like what people say about you or your issues or your sector or your activities or, heaven forbid, your senior leadership. But it is absolutely vital. You wouldn't dream of driving a car without seeing where you're going, and you shouldn't dream of investing in any activity without knowing how it's going to land. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend money doing that, but the bigger the investment, or the more important the investment, the greater the case for investing in that process.
Great, really helpful context. Thank you, Andrew. Libby, over to you. So Prism Fellowship International, just give us a top line of what you do as an organisation.
Okay, so Prison Fellowship International is the world's largest global association of Christian ministries working in the criminal justice field. We run programs in prisons and with families and victims all over the world through our partner organizations, 122 countries. It's a really, really amazing mission to get to be part of. I've been with the organization for 10 years. And prior to that, I started my career working at Fleishman-Hillard in public relations with consumer brands. And so the insights topic actually is something I'm really passionate about. Most large agencies have a built-in data analytics and insights component to them. They wouldn't dream of pitching a new piece of business without really understanding the product or the client that they're going out to before they show up for that meeting, to make sure that they had a competitive advantage against another agency that's going in the door. So when the opportunity arose for us to leverage insights to enhance what we're doing with mass donors specifically for Prison Fellowship International, we jumped on it.
Excellent. And Gareth, from a Jersey Road point of view, why, as an agency, is Jersey Road so passionate about insights?
So the reason we exist is because we want to reframe public perceptions of Christianity. We feel like it's a very negative and narrow narrative, and there's 5 ways I think we can do that. One is by telling good news stories and raising the profile of good news stories. Second, by being thought leaders in issues that matter to society from a faith lens. The third is that the church becomes world class at saying sorry, which this is the right week to be talking about that. The fourth is that when there is malicious attack, that we're not a walkover and we're not a doormat, but we have a robust response. And then the fifth is that everything is underpinned by good data. And I think we, for a long time at Jersey Road, just because we were a smaller agency, we didn't have the infrastructure internally to feed the insights into the start of the strategic process. But we've really been deliberate in the last few years, and it's been as we brought better people or the right people into the agency who have identified this as an area where we can't just create communication strategy with finger in the air and with best guess, and even with in the past it's worked like this, because the present is not the past. And so we have to understand who is it we're talking to, we have to understand what's going to land with them, and we have to understand their pain points. And so that's why we've created Insights, an Insights part to the agency, and why we're investing increasingly in that area.
So Libby, for you, jumping straight into what you're going through at the moment with PFI, I mean, we've put the question out there as the first part, why bother with Insights? I'll put that straight to you. Why at PFI have you decided this is important for us, and what are you doing about that?
Andrew mentioned this, but I think it's really important not to be too precious about what you think people care about as it relates to your organization. We all have messages, we all have marketing things that we've done, and that we feel maybe a little bit protective of. And I think going into a new phase for the organization in trying to build a mass donor program for the future, we were at a bit of a crossroads, and we said, how are we going to do this? How are we going to connect with our audience in a way that was really going to resonate with their heart, with what they're passionate about, not what we want to tell them about what we do or why we think what we do is important, but what is it about our work that actually resonates with them. And so we had this great chance to dig into those things, test some of the messaging that we'd already put together, but also introduce new concepts and learn what it was that somebody would say, gosh, of all the things that I have in front of me, which, you've got 8 seconds to actually capture the attention of somebody who's online. And so you really want to make sure that your message is going to resonate with them. That's why we really jumped at the opportunity to say, before we even start spending any money in this space, we need to know what is it that's going to resonate, and then we can test those things out as you then start actually doing advertising for it. So that was the impetus for it. Yeah.
Great. And so just thinking practically, people would love to know, I think we'll start with you, Libby, what Insights can do for me, what Insights can do for my organisation this evening. And I'm just thinking there's probably some key areas that I'd just like us all to comment on in terms of the practical outworking of, if we invest in Insights, we can improve in this area. One of those is reaching new territories, reaching new audiences. Don't know if you have any thoughts on that, and then we'll bring the guys in on that.
I think for many of you in the audience, if you work in either the marketing and communications landscape or you're in fundraising, right, you've got 2 sides of the house that you're thinking about. I oversee the mass and the mid-level work that we do for the organization, as well as our marketing and communications department. And that was really, really helpful as we approached this topic, because it allowed us to pull back several spaces and not just say, okay, we're only going for one specific audience to learn about, but this is going to serve the wider organization as well. We have a diverse range of audiences, to use that word again, that we communicate with. And I think for us, we saw it as an opportunity to have a foundational conversation around, okay, these things that we say, for example, and not to cut to that topic, but when we say we're a global organization or a worldwide organization, it doesn't really hit with people. They hear it, and it sounds big, and it sounds important, and it is. But it's not the thing that actually catches their heart. But when you say, we're in a prison in the Philippines, in Lebanon, in Ukraine, that catches an emotional response. That level of specificity. And that's an insight that we learned through this process that we've now just come through at Jersey Road. So I think it's, you're asking what ways can insights help you? It can help you to do top-line messaging about your organization overall. You can do it with a very specific audience that you're trying to communicate and connect with, if it's mass donors, if it's mid-level donors, if it's major donors, if you're strategic partners, if you've got, like us, we've got affiliates, so you're association-based, you're trying to connect with them. All of those different audiences are going to connect with your organization in a unique way. Insights can help you do that better.
And Gareth, throw over to you in terms of insights being able to improve your levels of engagement and the work we've done at Jersey Road. What would you say into that? I mean, we've got improved engagement, donor retention, lots of things that we could say. Insights will definitely help you to target your messaging there. What would you add to what Libby said?
Well, I think the problems start, when, particularly for Christian organizations, not every Christian organization wants to reach Christians. But when Christian organizations do want to reach Christians, they often treat Christians as an amorphous group. And I think that is not being a good steward of the donor money or the strategy. And so I think what Insights helps you do is bring laser focus to who is it we're trying to target. So the example that's used quite a lot in space, and there might be, I think there's some people from Alpha here tonight. Alpha, about 10 years ago, said our target audience is going to be a black 24-year-old male. And they had a picture of him on the wall. In fact, I think he was a member of the team, and they had a picture of him on the wall. And all of their communications, their tone of voice, the channels they used, the look and feel of the visual targeted that. Now, we all know that Alpha is not filled with 24-year-old black males, but what it did do was bring a consistency to the brand voice and the brand messaging, which then attracted a whole host of people. And so I think what Insights helps you do is understand your audience in a really specific way, but then understand what messages land with that audience. And I think one of the other issues is that may have changed because the world has changed massively over the last, I don't know if you've noticed, but there was like a pandemic and stuff. And I believe there's been a US election recently, and a whole load of things have changed the dynamic politically, socially, and spiritually. And so even if the message used to land, it may not be landing for the same audience. It may not be landing in the future. And so what I think we've seen is it has been an incredibly useful tool. Now, the barrier to people, this might be a question you're coming to later, so apologies if you are, but the barrier is that there's a perception of Insights being expensive and difficult to see the ROI on, and difficult to kind of convince the board to agree on. But the counter to that is that Insights means you're a better steward, as I said, of the donor money, better steward of the strategy, and you can better analyze the activity of the comms or the fundraising. You can better analyze that through a more specific lens. So that's why I think we've seen Insights generate far more. It's become far more important to the process.
Andrew, any thoughts on what's been said by Libby and Gareth?
Thank you. My take on it is I think slightly broader in that I would see Insight as providing strategic and tactical plus another a value to charities. So strategic would be answering the question, what's achievable? What is a reasonable target for us or strategic goal for us based on gaining a knowledge of our marketplace or where we sit in the world vis-a-vis the people with whom we're competing for funds or whatever, or attention. And how do we triangulate that? And then tactically, this feeds into what you were saying, what are the messages, the channels, and so on for each of those audiences? I think there's a third area as well, which probably fits under the tactical, which is how do we demonstrate, how can we use insight to show that we understand a particular audience? It's a sort of thought leadership piece as well. I don't think I think there's almost no audience that's off limits. I don't know that we could do dukes or earls, but and prisoners are a challenge. But
it's in the name.
But almost any other group you can think of is doable. So if your principal audience is a local government audience, for example, insight's available there. If you want to expand your donor base beyond the traditional boundaries, the opportunity is there to work out how best to do that.
Andrew, while you've still got the mic, I'm going to do something very dangerous. I'm going to quote you, but it's all right because it was on our podcast, so I'm allowed to do that. So Andrew recently came on one of our podcast episodes, which is Comscast with Jersey Road, and we delved into a lot of this with insights. And Andrew said something which I really found interesting, so I'd love you to just comment on this. Hopefully you remember saying this, Andrew. If not, just go with it. But Andrew, you said audience insights is about making every donor pound sweat to the max. It's about performance enhancement. Now, that really stuck out to me as I was hosting that podcast episode. Could you just go into that a little bit deeper for us? What does that actually look like? What does that mean in reality? Because you were very passionate about that.
I think it goes back to what I said at the very start, that if we were having this conversation in a purely commercial context, if you're launching a new product or a new brand, you wouldn't spend a penny doing anything without first understanding how it's going to land and working out what the response is going to be to any kind of campaign before investing in its planning and its execution. And it's also, we'll come on to the cost thing. I don't want to shoot any foxes for later, but there's also this perception that it requires a huge investment, and it need not. There's been another of these events that Gareth speaks of is the invention of the internet, which has transformed the whole research supply chain. It's faster, it's cheaper, it's more flexible. I think the only country in the world, so after post-Comres, when I set up Whitestone about 18 months ago, with a very small team compared with what we had at Comres, there was no audience that we couldn't get to at Whitestone that we could get to at Comres. But the only country on earth that you can't do is North Korea. Although I'd like to have a go. As I mentioned a moment ago, there's no audience you can't get. So there's no reason in theory as to why it's any of this is not doable, eminently possible.
Yeah, really helpful.
I think it's about stewardship, which is what Jessica said at the beginning. We're all so conscientious of making every single dollar count. And if you're measuring the effectiveness of your various fundraising strategies or, what kind of money you're spending where, it really is it's about stewardship. Understanding who you're talking to, what's going to resonate with them is a better use of an initial upfront cost so that all those messages later land the way that you want them to, than just kind of throwing, I don't know what you throw at the wall, spaghetti at a wall and seeing, okay, something's going to stick, right? It's about stewardship.
So Gareth and Andrew have both alluded to the cost of insight. So you can clearly see they're chomping a bit to get there. So let's go there. Let's entertain that. So moving into how to get going with insights then. There are lots of myths that maybe we can bust around what it looks like to get involved with insights. And obviously one of those is the cost, the elephant in the room. Gareth, from your point of view, what most often do you find are the main barriers for clients we work with, or just in your experience when it comes to this is a potential barrier stopping me getting going with insights?
I think when clients are at a point of panic, that can be a barrier because they need something to happen tomorrow. And the danger of creating, well, it's not really strategy, the danger of being tactical out of panic is that you make short-term decisions and just, throw that spaghetti basically. And I get it, it is difficult when you've got a donor base that is maybe aging, when you've got a board that are setting ambitious targets, when you've got maybe a CEO who's doesn't quite understand the comms function or has maybe got unrealistic expectations. But it's very difficult to justify those spaghetti. I'll stop talking about spaghetti throwing in a minute, but it's very difficult to justify that from a long-term perspective. And most of the clients who come to us, most of the prospective clients who come to us, they say to us, we want to change our audience or expand our audience in some ways. So that could be a younger audience. Usually when people say a younger audience to us, they mean 50 and 60-year-olds rather than 75-year-olds. We're not jumping onto TikTok straight away, but when you're looking to engage a new audience, you have to understand that audience and what you have. And we're doing a project just now with the Jesus film, and it's in 35 countries. We can't just take the assets and the messaging from the States and hope it works in Pakistan and in Iran. We have to do research to understand what is going to work in that audience, with that audience. So whether it's a geographical audience, whether it's a denominational audience, what you say to a Baptist is going to be different to what you say to a vineyard pastor, which is going to be different to a Redeemed Church of God. Understanding these things will help you long term, and you do have to work hard sometimes at convincing the board and convincing the exec that this is worth the investment. We've got one client, just one prospective client at the minute we're talking to, who basically are saying we have to invest in this area, but it's a big risk for us to do so. And we take that seriously. We take that very seriously. We see this as kingdom money, and so we want to be good stewards of it too. But you have to be able to do it to then put together a strategy that's actually going to work. And of course, it's not 100% foolproof, and not foolproof. It's not 100% guaranteed going to work. But you're certainly taking it from 30% up to 70%, or you can do the numbers. But
yeah, Andrew's a numbers guy. Andrew, do you relate to these sticking points from a Whitestone perspective?
Absolutely do, and it can be tough if we're working for a client where we're doing some kind of reputation research or even brand research or something, and we have to go to the client and say you're barking up the wrong tree, or they don't like your chief exec, or they don't, whatever it happens to be. I'd say fear, budget, and uncertainty are sort of not knowing how to do it are typically the three barriers that we come across most, and that's common across Christian and other clients.
Okay, so Libby, having heard that, you guys at PFI are in the middle of what you're doing with your Insights project, which is great because we've got a live demonstration. You're in that nice messy middle phase where you're still working it out. What, if any, barriers did you guys face? What have you had to work through on the journey that you're still on?
Great question. I think for us, we happen to be, and I mentioned this earlier, at a crossroads. So we'd already decided to stop spending a certain amount of money in the marketplace. And that pause allowed us to say, we don't mind spending, 2 months doing something. In our case, it's different in every case, by the way. It can be faster, it can go longer, especially if you're getting multiple people across your organization involved. But for us, it took 2 months to get all of that coordinated and to get the information. And we were willing to do it because we had this natural pause. We'd looked at the whole budget and we'd collaborated across departments to apportion the budget to do it. And, I happen to be a hardcore J on the Myers-Briggs. I'm very fortunate that my COO and my CEO are also hardcore Js, so selling them on data-driven insights was not difficult in my case. But I think if that's not necessarily what you have, the conversation around ROI and the importance of really making sure that every dollar you're spending counts is one that you will ultimately win. It may take some time, and it may be something that you can't just carve out money in your budget in the calendar year that you're working on it. You might have to do it next year and say, hey, we're going to put aside this amount of money to do this project, and we're going to delay other things for X amount of time as you plan that in order to make room for it. But it will ultimately make you more effective, and that's going to be hard to argue with. Once you get your results and you incorporate them into your messaging or however you plan to use them to become a more effective organization, then you measure, right? Did it work? How did it enhance any number of measurement metrics that we have in place? If it's fundraising metrics, did we have an increase in response rate? Did we have an increase in average gift? Did we have you can actually measure whether what you've done is effective, and you should. And over time, that's something that I think leaders, if they were hesitant about it, or they were nervous, or they weren't, wanting to step into that, you can do it in a small way to start, and then prove it out, essentially.
So Libby, you mentioned about buying there was quite straightforward and that people were aligned and understood this is why we need to invest into insights. Say that wasn't the case. I think the reality is a lot of people would have to work quite hard to get that, especially top-down buy-in. Any thoughts on what that would have looked like, or what you would say to those who say, Libby, I'd love to be in that situation, but it's not quite like that for me?
I think it's just what I a little bit walked through, which is the importance of really getting your metrics in order and knowing what it is that you're going to hold yourself accountable to once you actually get the insights, so that you can walk in with a plan and say, okay, I know this is something that we may not have budget for in this budget cycle. Here's why I want to carve out the budget to do it in this next cycle. This is what we're going to test. This is then how we're going to know if it's being effective. If you baseline, we're going to baseline over the next 3 months and assess these things that are important to us. So we set it. Then we're going to do the insights, and then we're going to test again. And I think, at least from a leadership standpoint, that becomes difficult to argue with, because you're saying, I'm willing to actually go to the mattresses. I'm willing to prove this out to you, to do it. And in that time, you get together with an insights partner that can help you shape a plan that maybe starts small, so that the insights you're testing are either on, maybe it's one specific message, or it's a really targeted audience, before you then say, all right, we're going to do this for the whole of the organization. Maybe it's not something that, you start with from the top level.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something that's just small in your arena.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Really practical.
Yeah.
And just coming back, Andrew, to that issue of perceived cost, that it costs an arm and a leg to even get going. How do I dip my toe in? Are there levels of, I'm not 100% sure, I don't have loads of data analysts, maybe I'm not particularly there in terms of buy-in? Can people incrementally work up? Are there different levels of access with this stuff?
Yes.
Care to explain?
As I say, the internet has radically changed the speed and resource demands of doing this sort of thing. So we went into field today with a poll over the weekend. So the client will get results on Monday from a 2,000 strong nationally representative sample of UK adults with full demographic cross breaks. and it costs them £345 plus VAT per question. So and that's not a simple yes/no question. Some of those questions are testing on a agree-disagree scale, a series of statements, or it could be all sorts. There are imaginative ways of doing that. So it can be inexpensive. Where the cost comes in is where there is human intermediation. So focus groups cost more money than, and these days, we do AI-powered qualitative research, which is great fun because you can see these interviews being done, and the AI is fantastic because not only does the bot ask probing questions, but it's, of course, because it's AI, you can ask it to analyze the data, reams of data for you, and it does that instantly. And it also means that instead of having, say, 16 people across 2 focus groups that costs £7,000 to set up and 2 weeks to organise, it means that within a couple of days you can do those qualitative interviews with 50 people or 100 people. So you get an awful lot more reach. It gives you a lot more options for looking into different audiences.
So would you agree, Gareth, that at some level everybody can access dipping their toe into insights?
Oh yeah, I mean, you can do it for free. If you're just looking at your social account and looking at the analytics that Facebook and Instagram and all these things give you, this is probably teaching everyone to suck eggs, but you can do it for free. But obviously, the more you invest in it, the more you're going to get out of it, like anything. So I think it's potentially, to begin with, if it is a barrier for the board or for the exec, then it's maybe worth starting somewhere lower level to show some proving the process. But I think it's the tools are there now to make it there's been a democratization in some ways of the tools, and certainly a lower cost, as Andrew's been talking about, and I think that's made it far more accessible.
And just to add at this point, so on behalf of us at Jersey Roads, we have recently launched a new service offering to do with insights. So it's called Intelligent Tracker. And Gareth's going to unpack in a moment a little bit more about what that is. But we do actually have a very quick explainer video that we'd like to play to you, which will say much more than I'm able to, and then we'll quickly revert back to Gareth.
When your organisation invests valuable resources into marketing and donor engagement, you want to give it the best chance of achieving your goals. How do I find an audience who connects with our cause? How can I deliver communications that really resonate with our donors? Which media should I focus on? A lack of firm insights will keep you guessing. At Jersey Road, we understand the importance of moving away from best guess towards targeted insights. That's why we've developed a tool you can trust to bring your audience into focus. Meet Intelligent Tracker. Intelligent Tracker sources and analyzes information about audience behavior to give you fast, reliable insights that can shape your strategy and take your comms to the next level. Intelligent Tracker can help you find influencers who are passionate about the same issues you are. Compare audience engagement with your brand versus your competitors. Develop and shape evidence-based brand personas. Reach new supporters and widen your donor base. So, if you're ready to get a clearer picture of who your audience is and how you can best engage them for your cause, subscribe to Intelligent Tracker today.
Okay, so that is Intelligent Tracker, a new service offering. Gareth, could you just give us the top line on what the concept was, what the idea was, why this was needed?
We just wanted a pretty video, and we're so delighted to have that. If you want to speak to the voice of that video, Teresa is in the third row back. We're very conscious of the fact that we are an agency, and therefore we're not a freelancer, and therefore we're more expensive But what we wanted to do, we come into contact with so many organizations of such varying sizes that we know could benefit from some of these insights as we've been talking about, but would be put off by the bigger projects. And so we wanted to help create something that was very simple, that could be used by a one-man band if they wanted to. It could be used by a 3 or 4 or 5-man band too, but it could be used in a very practical way. And we're obviously we are a comms agency, and so a lot of what the applications we're seeing are from a comms lens, but it can be used from a fundraising lens and from other lenses as well. But we've seen the environment change so much in comms, where particularly with influencers, it has just, Jessica, when we're talking to clients, often says, a few years ago we talked about YouTubers, and no one talks about YouTubers anymore. It's all influencers. And we are basically treating influencers as a media channel now. They're as important to our comm strategy as reaching out to any of the media. But this helps every organization find who those influencers might be and how they can then use them, but it also helps compare against competitors, as we've said, and it also helps develop some very basic audience personas. Now, there are very detailed audience persona work that can be done that does cost more than what Intelligent Tracker costs, and that can be useful too. But this, if you're looking for a starting point, gives a really helpful understanding of who is our audience and how do they behave, how do they speak, which influencers are they following, which influencers are following. No, that doesn't work. Just which influencers are they following, and how do we engage with them? So that was the purpose of this, was for us to create something that could help people get on the rung of the ladder, basically, and we hope it will be a helpful tool.
Great. So that's just a very brief snapshot. If you'd love to find out more, please grab Gareth at the end. There's a QR code on the screen which will take you through to our dedicated Intelligent Tracker page, and from there you can let us know how it would help you with that.
Can I also just say, Liam, Francesca, could you just stand up? Just a sec, sorry. You can also talk to Francesca. Francesca actually works on the reports that Intelligent Tracker produces, so if you want to talk to her about the actual outputs of what Intelligent Tracker looks like, then you can talk to Francesca.
Great. Okay, so can we just very quickly touch on some impact? So conscious that we want to ground a lot of what we're saying, a lot of the theory in, okay, you guys are up here, can you let us know how it's actually working on the ground so we can see it go all the way through to completion? Andrew, for you, could you perhaps just give us 1 or 2 examples of people who've come to Whitestone Insight and they've been able to see some tangible impact that you could say, this has been a good move to pursue insights? Sure
thing. I think the example that comes to mind immediately for you as an audience is when we were working with a charity whose donor file was shrinking and getting older, dying basically, and they'd been appealing to the same sort of churchmanship and denomination types for the life of the charity going back decades. And so we did some work for them to understand if they were to go beyond the boundaries of their traditional donor base, how that would go down. Now they were going for the lowest hanging fruit for them, and this is where it became, I think, quite challenging for them, because they realised that they'd have to do something different to appeal to a different audience. But the audience was there. That was the point, that we could show them that if they got their messaging right and their branding right to that audience, that it would work, and that's playing out now. Where I'd give another example is where we worked with, this is from the corporate world, where we worked with, this is a ComRes example, where we worked with Scottish Widows, and Scottish Widows were fresh to, but I think this has an application beyond that. They were fresh to the whole area of trying to influence their public policy environment, and they needed an issue to own, and we worked with them to look at several different options, and we ended up working with them. And you may think this isn't rocket science, but a lot of this stuff isn't rocket science when you see it. And we looked at an alignment between their commercial strategy and their public policy strategy, which meant that they went out explicitly to own the issue of women's pensions. And so they were able then to use their corporate branding and product branding really fantastically well to short track their path to being considered as an established player in the whole political world. So we were understanding, measuring how this was landing with policymakers at the same time. They had an aspiration to be up there with Prudential, Legal and General, the ones who were regarded as the heavy political hitters, and they got there in a very short space of time by doing that. But it was because they, and whether it's in the commercial area or whether it's for, it's equally appropriate for a charity to say we want to occupy this space. This is where we're planting our flag. Where should that flag go, and how do you go about dominating the conversation in that space? And there's a direct read across, I think, from that.
Libby, slightly different question to you, because of course you're still not at the destination, so I won't make you uncomfortable there. But maybe tell us what your anticipated end goal is in terms of the impact. What are you all hopeful of and driving towards?
I think I will say at least a little bit of where we are, which is it's created a discipline internally around our messaging that is really important. We all know the good idea fairy. We all have them in our lives. They come and they say we should be saying this. And I think it's just, many of you work in comms, for your organizations. This is your responsibility, is to be the steward of your brand. When you've got the messaging that you've built from your insights, it becomes very difficult for others to come in and say, gosh, you really ought to be saying this. And you can say, we tried that, it didn't hit. It didn't actually resonate with this audience. Doesn't mean it won't with that one. We could try that. But I think it does create a little bit of a discipline internally in ensuring there's alignment on how you communicate. I think for us, like you said, we're still in the middle of it. We're working now to incorporate the insights that we've found into actually our entire messaging architecture for the organization. And we relaunched donor acquisition for the mass donor file in January, where we'll be testing out some of the things that we've distilled down and seeing how it performs. The good news is we've got a baseline of data with which to measure the effectiveness against. And I think the next 3 to 6 months are going to be really telling for us for if what we've learned and the hypothesis we now have about, we think this is it, this is our niche. And I'm not going to give away any state secrets, sorry. But to really see, okay, can we mobilize people around this? It's a very exciting prospect for us, and we'll find out. Stay tuned.
Gareth, any thoughts on what's already been said or add to?
So one of the passions I have is that I feel like the perception that people have of the church is driven by the media and social media narrative a lot of the time. And that is not always based on reality. There was an article done last year by the Times, and the headline was "The Church is in Decline." And when you looked at the article, it was only Church of England data they'd used. And so it was accurate that the Church of England is in decline. And I'm not saying the church more globally or in the UK is not in decline, but when you only use data that is from one denomination, it's very dangerous, because actually those headlines and the then subsequent sharing of those headlines influence how the church feels about itself and its own health. And I think the church is in a better place than where we think it is. Now, I am an optimist, right? But there's a book called Factfulness that came out a few years ago, a guy called Hans, someone. Google it. But the premise of the book was, we assume that the world is in a terrible place. But if you look at all of the data points to measure where society is at, in almost all of those data points, we're in a far better place than we were 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So you looked at things like girls in education, looked at things like hygiene, looked at things like poverty. And now, he's not saying everything's fine, but he's saying when there's a narrative that's got a particular bias, then it creates a perception in the public. And I think that's where we're operating from at the minute. There was an all-party parliamentary group for faith and media about 5 or 6 years ago. The conclusion of it was that the media are illiterate. Use the word illiterate when it comes to faith. They present stereotyped experiences and not lived reality of people of faith. But when a church leader, a local church leader in Littlehampton or Berkhamsted or other places read that headline, they assume it's reality. And so I think that's where it's important that's just an example, but I think it's important for us not to assume our audiences and to assume their preferences. And we all live in echo chambers. And the algorithmic world in which we live nowadays has intensified those echo chambers. I'm not going to try and bring politics into this, but when I looked through my timeline before the Brexit vote, I was convinced it was going the other way, because everyone in my timeline was saying something other than what happened. Now, again, I'm not making a point, but it shows you that our perception is based on the echo chambers that the algorithms often put in front of us, or the media put in front of us, rather than lived reality. And so I think it's really important that we understand what's happening outside of those echo chambers, and only insights can do that. That's the only way we can do it. One of the key problems that I think we have at the minute, well, we did have, maybe we have less now, I will stop talking in a second, is that from a major donor perspective in the UK, there was basically 5 or 6 people that every Christian charity went to. We could all name them. And I think there is a whole plethora of high net worth Christians, either working in the city or somewhere else, who are maybe not attending church every week, but they love Jesus, they don't know what to do with their money. And we're not talking to a lot of those people, or a lot of organizations are not talking to those people because we're not reaching out of the echo chamber. So I think that's what Insights does, is help reach out of the echo chamber and present a more accurate picture of reality, which then we can build strategy on that can then be more effective.
Okay, so if we're agreed, Insights has impact. We're going to wrap this up by just talking about how to actually implement the insights and data you have. Now, Andrew, you're about to slip away. You need to leave us. So before you go, could you just sum up for us, from your perspective, some keys in how you've seen it implemented well, or how you would advise people, okay, we've got the data, we've done the polls, whatever it is, what are some of the key questions or do next that people need to really grapple with?
All the data, any data you buy has to sweat. It's got to be actionable, and whoever you work with should be somebody who knows how to put that into practice, and I think that is really important. There are wholesalers of data out there, but I think it's wise and prudent to work with organisations that know what they're doing, and it's horses for courses. If you're getting data that you want to be published in the media, you need a British Polling Council member to run that poll for you, which comes with some strings attached, but it's worth it for the credibility. If you're looking for something specialist in a particular sector, there are specialists that you can go to that will cover off whatever audience it is that you're looking for. But the main thing is to answer the so what questions. So what do I do with this? And have that in mind before you embark on it. Think about what the objectives are and stick to that. And I'm sometimes a bit of a data geek, and I do, there's nothing I love more than getting some data tables. I'm a bit old school. I like PDFs, not Excel, and I just like to go through them somewhere quiet and work out, just get a feel for what the audience is thinking about, in relation to the objectives of the research. And you need somebody who can do that for your projects and your organisation.
And as you go, Andrew, just quickly, how can people reach out to you if they have any questions or interested to find out more about Whitestone?
Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind of you. Whitestoneinsight.com, Andrew or on X, Twitter, whatever you call it. I'm Pigs and Polling, long story.
Memorable name.
Yeah.
Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. We'll let you go at this point. We'll move on to a Q&A in a moment. Thanks, mate.
Thank you, boss. Cheers. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Thank you.
That's a great exit,
That is,
isn't it?
He specifically.
We should all do that.
Anything that else I should just also.
Yeah. In about 5 minutes, you go out.
Yeah, he specifically asked that we do that, and he walked straight down the middle for effect.
I hope you've got my theme music ready for my exit.
Just wrapping up there, and obviously off the back of what Andrew has just said, Gareth, what would you add to that? So of course we work with clients. That's it. Come a bit closer. We're through a project. What are some of the main ways that you've seen data implemented well or not so well? What would you say?
I think I've seen it implemented well when it's been used to create a story. So we did a story. This was quite fun actually. We did a story about a couple of years ago that was on prayer, and the findings were that young people prayed more than older people, and no one believed it. So we pitched it to the BBC. They ran it, and it caused an absolute furore because people were saying, this is not my lived reality, this is not what's happening, there must be they had to get this. So the company that Andrew sold Comrades to, Savanta, they had to get their CEO onto the BBC to talk about the methodology so that they could convince people that it wasn't, and it was 2,000 people again that we had interviewed. But it created a great story, and interestingly, the Church of England did the exact same study a year later and found the exact same findings. And so I felt a bit kind of vindicated at that point. But so it's great for, as Andrew was alluding to, great for thought leadership. So when people are coming to you with, and you're kind of positioning yourself as someone who's got access to data, and you've got new information that is maybe not out there already, it can be very useful. And then just in the ways that we've talked about already, in terms of understanding the audience and being more kind of laser focused in your strategy.
Okay, final word to you, Libby. Have you already got it neatly lined out into how exactly you're using your insights? You know the end goal, or is it a case of we're still working this out and we'll decide how to utilize the insights further down the line? I mean, how much in advance do you need to get ahead?
I think for us, we took a really systematic approach. We've gone through this process, as working out what are we trying to solve, who's our audience, and what's the channel by which that we want to be communicating, with them, and then working on the insights to solve that problem, or assess the information that we have against that particular audience. From there, then we've gone into conversations around, okay, let's expand it a little bit. What does it look like, if we're having these insights work into our messaging, overall organization messaging, as well as audience-specific messaging, and then working all the way into, okay, how are we incorporating this into our fundraising strategies? So it's really been, I think we've thought about it from the beginning. I think what has been great is we're seeing how it plays out in real time, that plan is working. At least for us, to organize us around what it is that we're actually trying to communicate and help people connect with as it relates to our mission and the vision that we have.
I'm sure you'd agree. It's been so helpful just having you, Libby, because you're in the thick of it. So I think it can be nice to
I wish I could tell you that we've solved the problem. Like we've totally unlocked, how to generate a 50,000 person house file of donors, and we're doing it next year. And we were doing it in half the cost, right, of what we thought. But I think most of us in our jobs are in the messy middle. I actually took that from you. I hope that's all right.
That's right, you're allowed.
We're in the messy middle, and I think we're pleased with what we've learned. I think prisoners and crime are not fuzzy feeling topics. They're not things that you latch onto. It's also more complicated than water or education. There's nuances to it. And so for us to make sure that we are getting it right as it relates to, hey, I actually think that you may not know that that prison ministry could be part of your personal ministry, but it actually can. And then saying that with a genuineness and an earnestness because we've done the work to understand what motivate people to engage with us in the first place, just feels really right, no matter what comes out on the other side of it. We've got some expectations for sure. But yeah, we're excited to be in it now.
Excellent. Sounds very hopeful. Good way to finish that. So thank you, Libby. Okay, we're going to break up for a bit of a Q&A now. Give it 5 minutes or so. I think I'm going to steal your mic, Gareth. Thank you. Francesca, are you the person I'm giving this to? Or is it someone else? Are you happy to just run around? Thank you. So, any questions are welcome. If you could just start by saying who you are in your organisation, that'd be really helpful. And Francesca will get the mic to you. So feel free. Anything you'd like to ask?
It's Laura Trenier from Frank Analysis. How do you balance when you want that niche laser focus, but also you want to reach an entire audience? At what point does the integrity of the organisation get lost at that point?
Yeah, great.
It's got to be one of you.
Thank you for that. It's a very simple question. I'm not sure I can necessarily speak to the integrity, but I think let me give you from our perspective as Jersey Road. So the more we understood who we serve, the more our target audience understood who we were, and the more we grew. So I'm being really honest with you here. When we started Jersey Road, we were just delighted anyone wanted to invoice for anything. So we were doing projects all over the shop. We were working for football teams, for solicitors, for various others. And then we had a bit of a Gideon moment, and we felt God saying, I only want you to work in the Christian space, and I only want you to work in comms. And so at that point, we had to make a decision of what we would say no to. And that's the most powerful decision we've made, or the most important decision we've made in the journey of Jersey Road, was saying no to everything apart from what we knew was our focus. So my answer to your question is, when you know what your focus is, you lose your integrity when you go anywhere other than that focus. And it's hard. It's hard to say no to dollars, and it's hard to say no to opportunity, but it does keep you very disciplined, is the word that Libby used earlier. And it is also hard because we're all fishing in a very small pond. But I actually think focus helps that, and I think that it gives you a better strategic approach to the pond, if that's a way of putting it. So I think you do have to say no to more when you become focused, but I think that is the best decision you can make as an organisation.
Anything to add to that, Libby? Or are we happy with Gareth's great answer?
I think we talked about, and I'll get really practical, but we talked about having a project that's, specific to one audience, and a particular messaging that you might have. You can do that. You can also do the top line messaging for the whole of the organization, and then build a messaging architecture that breaks down by audience type. And there may be differences, right, that you're flexing into depending on who you're talking to. It doesn't mean it's any less core to who you are, right? But we work with the children and families of prisoners as well, right? And there are times where I'm talking to somebody where that's the thing for them that gets them. And it doesn't mean that that's not core to our organization, or that the work we did to get our top line messaging about, who we are and our work with prisoners, specifically isn't relevant or important, but I'm just flexing into a messaging that better connects, that takes our mission and connects it to where that person's passion is. I'm not sure if that was what you were asking, but I'm hoping it is another angle on what you were saying.
Great, thank you for that. Any other questions?
Yeah, thanks both. Really enjoyed that session, very helpful. I'm Ben, currently in government comms, but joining Jersey Road in the new year. Just interested if you've got any sort of tips and advice for a situation, for example, where the insight is saying one thing, but maybe the board, the CEO want to push in a different direction. What do you do?
So you've not joined us yet, Ben. So thank you for that question. That is a tricky one, but I think so. If the methodology is good, then I think you have to trust it, and I think you actually maybe have to cast a. This is a bit maybe it sounds a bit manipulative, but you have to cast a picture of what will happen if you don't to the exec, and if they're so stubborn and so kind of blind to the reality, then the demise will come quick, especially in the world that we're currently operating. We're living in a post-Christian context anyway, and most donor bases are aging, as we talked about earlier. So the sense I get is that most execs and most boards recognize the urgency with which to find a new strategy. Very few of the organizations who come to us say, we're very happy with our donor base currently and we'd like to just keep going as we are. What most organizations come to say is our donor base is aging, or we've got as much as we can out of the Baptists or out of whatever it is. We need to find a new way of funding this. And so I think if you're in that situation and they're still not listening to the data, then I mean, at that point, I would question whether or not I would stay there, to be honest, because I think it's not going to be around for much longer.
I think I agree with all of that. I think part of it is managing expectations up front too, before you even get into it, and having the heavy, deep, and real conversation, if you will, that we may not like some of the things that come out of this, or we're not going to be like Gollum. I'm like revealing who I am. We're not going to be holding on to these things like they're too precious, right? We're going to hold it like water, because if this isn't resonating, then it's not good for us and we shouldn't be saying it. And if you've prepared, folks accordingly, we actually found that a lot of the things that we say are quite good. People tend to like it. It was actually just a tweak here or a little tweak there that actually strengthened it and better connected. But I think we were prepared that there may be things that we're saying that are just not even, we're not even going to say it at all anymore. And I think then if you've set the expectation, they may ultimately be pleasantly surprised that, hey, look, actually how you're saying this is working, but we just have to tweak this one thing and it's going to really work, right? It's going to really hit. So maybe a little bit of the managing expectations up front as well is a way to approach it.
Great.
Mark from Urban Saints. Given all that you've said, do we go to Whitestone and get insights and then come to you for messaging? Do we just come to you and you handle the whole thing? Just a practical question.
Yeah, good practical. So we have no fear about putting people on stages who are competing with us because this is a kingdom effort. There are overlaps with what Andrew does and what we do, but what Andrew does is more about polling. So his key focus is polling, and so if you're looking to do polling, we would use him anyway, probably if we were doing a polling project. So that's his specific focus. Our specific focus is audience insights and messaging, and then with Intelligent Tracker, it's about kind of a cheaper way of doing it, a lighter touch on all of those. So that's where the kind of land lies. I did not plant that question because it sounded like a planted question.
Planted, yeah.
So for Sean, it goes to you. That would involve Andrew.
Yes, we bring Andrew in for his specialism at the right time. Yeah. Oh.
Risky.
Hello, I'm Esther from Jersey Road. Gareth's looking at me like, why are you asking a question? I wanted to touch on something you said earlier, which was about qualitative versus quantitative. And if qualitative is the more expensive, but there's still a lot of value in it, how do you balance the need for both when you potentially can only use one at once?
I'm glad we're recording this. It's actually a great question. So there are some things that qualitative can do that quantitative just can't. And that's usually about getting under the bonnet of things, putting a bit more color on things, testing things. When we do messaging testing, people select on an online survey different to what they answer in a focus group. And answering in a focus group is usually more accurate, but not always. And so I think what we will try and do is always recommend what we see as the best options, and it will often be a light option, a standard option, and a premium option, and they will have different mixes of some qualitative and quantitative, some and kind of increasing that throughout. It depends on the project, though. So the stuff in Intelligent Tracker is pretty much all quantitative, and that is very useful and very cost effective. But it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So I think from a messaging perspective, I think it's helpful to have some qualitative because you can really test that messaging. And when you're trying to understand audiences, it's helpful to get what they've written on an online survey, but it's even more helpful to really speak to people. And we've done a project. We did an audience personas project for the Gideons in the States. And they wanted us to talk to just high net worth individuals. And so we had high net worth individuals in a room talking to them about what floats their boat. That would never have been an online quantitative survey. That's the only way we could do that is through qualitative. So it is determined sometimes by what the objectives are. But I think as much as you can, having a mix of the two is actually very useful because it brings a bit of color to the data.
Just to go deeper, Libby, do you mind answering the question as well in terms of when you started out on this, what were your objectives for it, and where did you see the mix of qualitative and quantitative and the priority of it when you embarked on this project?
Honestly, we thought, okay, insights, we heard about the Gideon's case study, and we knew that we had this challenge with building a mass file, or whether it was something we were even going to attempt to do for the future. And we came to Jersey Road and they gave us a plan. They said, here's what we think. We talked about it. We said, here's what we're trying to solve. And that they came with the mix for us. And ultimately we trusted it. So it was a mix. I think there was some live and then some qualitative, some quantitative. But we actually didn't know going into it. So for any of you who aren't really sure, find a partner that is an expert in the space, and they'll come to you with a plan.
Great. Thank you for those questions. I think we'll officially close things there. Libby, how can people get in touch with you if they want to just pick your brains, find out more about PFI? What should they do?
Okay, go to pfi.org to learn about Prison Fellowship International and the work that we do. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Libby Hart. So
simple as that. Okay. Libby, really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. Gareth, thank you for being here. Can we just show our appreciation for that? Thank you.